Brankamp as always, but once again, we do have Dimitri Physic with us, who was with us on the pregame show before the Coleraine game.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back here, and you know, it's exciting being in front of the camera. Like, I've been on the backside, but it's nice to be here.
As always, you love to be a part of a big Lakota football season, and they capitalized on that Friday night. They took on Coleraine. They officially went 10-0. They clinched part of the GFC title before. Coleraine is where they finally put the exclamation point on that sentence. They took it all home, and they really, really dug that grave for Coleraine like we thought Tom Bolton was going to do.
Yeah, like I said before the game, Lakota West was always going to beat Coleraine. There was no doubt there, and that's what Tom Bolton wanted to do, like you said. I remember before the game, I said the energy was absolutely wild in that locker room because I walked in, I checked it out, and I knew from the beginning that Lakota West was going to win just as they won every other game. So.
And a large part of that, what we did plus what the football team was able to do, a large part of that was senior night. And we saw those seniors, we talked about them a ton in the pregame. They really did come out, they capitalized on an opportunity, and they showcased what they were able to do.
Yeah, the seniors, of course, they wanted to win on senior night. I feel like that's any school's goal in the U.S., and especially there was double the goals there as they wanted to go 10-0, and they wanted to win on senior night.
Yeah, we have a couple seniors that we're going to be talking about throughout the night, one of which being Mitch Bolton, who was one of those guys that especially stepped up during that Coleraine game. One of those guys, he had multiple rushing touchdowns. And we've talked all year, Mitch Bolton able to get done through the air, through the ground. We saw a mixture of all of that in that Coleraine.
Yeah, you take a look at Mitch Bolton. It was against his former school, of course, and he did well. He wanted to win, just like Coach Bolton wanted to win against the former school he coached. And Mitch, like we knew all season, like he's done, he performed.
Yeah, it was an amazing performance all around, really. Mitch Bolton, one of those guys. We'll see a couple other familiar faces tonight. Mike Brankamp, one of the linebackers. We've talked about linebacker high all year long here at Lakota West. Mike Brankamp going to join us. We'll be able to get a little interview in with him. He had another big game and against those Coleraine Cardinals, able to do quite a bit.
Yeah, Mike Brankamp has just been one of the stars as we've seen all season for Lakota West. The star seniors, as we talked about in the pregame show we did. He did very well, coming back off of a few injuries and just performing for this Lakota West team.
Yeah, so we've seen a lot of seniors. We've talked a little bit about offense. We've talked a little bit about defense. A lot of people forget about the special teams unit. Tyler Bond been quietly consistent for these Firebirds all year long. We'll see a little bit of him tonight, hopefully out in the crowd. We've heard rumblings that he'll be here, not quite sure, but we hope that we do see him because he's been amazing for these Firebirds all year long.
You know, I'm going to be honest. If I was to play football, kicker would be the position I would play, and that's just because I play soccer. But, watching Tyler Bond all season, it's amazing what that kid can do. Just kicks 55-yard field goals routinely before the game. And in the game, I don't know if he's gotten a chance to kick that far of a distance yet, but he could definitely do it if he tried.
Right, in this Lakota West season, the capitalization was put on that after the Coleraine game, but you got to really take a look back at the whole season to kind of tell the story of what this football team has been able to do. It's been a truly historic season, not just around the Lakota district, not just around the area, but around Ohio as a whole. And it started week 1 against those St. Xavier Bombers, a very, I don't want to say worrisome game if you were a Firebird fan, but it was a little bit closer than you hoped, but a lot of that was that big rivalry game going up against the Bombers.
Yeah, I know when you and I started the Bird Talk podcast, we couldn't have Grant with us that first one, but we did say that was a rivalry game, or sort of had the feelings of a rivalry game, and the fact that we wanted the come from behind win gave us the momentum we needed to go 10-0 in the first undefeated season in Lakota West history.
Yeah, and Grant, you talk about this defense all the time. I think the St. X game really highlighted the defense. I mean, you take a look at the first half, St. X able to put up, 13 points. They didn't score again in the second quarter. Lakota West, I believe the final there was 16-13, if my memory keeps me correct. But they score 13 points. The Lakota West defense able to shut them out after they go into halftime. We heard a little bit about chairs getting broken there. Can't confirm anything, but we've heard rumblings. Not only was the defense able to come out, but the offense too. Everything seemed to click.
Yeah, it really did on that game. And one of the main parts that really got it to click there was the defensive secondary, led by Josh Fussell, Malik Hartford, and Ben Minnick, all 3 D1 recruits. That's what really gets the Lakota West secondary going. And what's a secondary without their defensive line? And Jacob Asbeck, through 10 games, had 8 sacks, 13 tackles for loss, and 50 tackles. He was really a superstar and what led this team throughout this year.
I mean, who do you think were the guys in that St. X game? Obviously something clicked, whether it be coaching or talent. I think it was a little bit of both. Who were the talent that kind of clicked late in that game?
Late in that game, the talent that really clicked, honestly, was Mitch Bolton. What he did when he locked in on that game and that St. X drive is he really put this team together, and it's what made that game a special game that we'll all remember.
Yeah, and you take a look at the offense, too. They were shut out in the first half, and then they come out. You saw how electric that last touchdown caught by Ben Minnick in that end zone was. I mean, everybody was going crazy. We were going crazy. You go back and you look at the clips from that broadcast. I mean, everybody was electric at that game. So on offense, obviously we've talked about Mitch Bolden. Who are some of the other guys you think that have made the difference, not only in that game, but really all year long?
Trent Lloyd, for sure. Really, what happened in that first game was Lakota West was lacking their identity and their offense in that first half. They hadn't quite figured themselves out, and a lot of that was they were missing one of their biggest stars, Trent Lloyd, so they were really trying to figure it out, and he came back, and the offense really found their rhythm and found what they were looking for, and they've done a lot of scheming in his ability to build around Trent. That's really led them to making a 10-0 run.
So the St. X game, a little close. It ended up being a 3-point differential with the final score. So, you know, some people a little concerned with how close it was, especially now at the end of the year. You take a look back at St. X's record, not the greatest. But then they came out next week at Lakota East, a Lakota rivalry game, and boy, did they blow them out of the water.
Yeah, they did. They ran the score up very high on that one, and that was our first glimpse of running back Davion McCoy. He really showed off his skills in that game.
Our star.
But yeah, he really showed off what he was able to do in that game, and it was quite impressive. Just Lakota's offense was really able to get through and make a move once it finally went.
And especially the defense too. You look at the final score; it's not a shutout. But let's be honest with ourselves. Lakota East calling that timeout on the goal line with their third stringers in, 3 seconds to go. I think you could chalk that one as a shutout for the Lakota West defense.
Yeah, you could really chop that one up to a shutout in that game. It was just one score there at that part in the game really just is what kicked it off. But those two, that was one of their multiple shutouts they had this season, if you count it as that.
Yeah, and then they keep it rolling just a few weeks after East. I believe it was week 3. They take on Sycamore, and you put up plus 50 points on Sycamore. I want to say it was like 56-0 was the final of that ball game. That's when we saw everything come together. It's like each part of the team had their moment. At East, everything kind of clicked, but Sycamore, it feels like that's where everything came together and made Lakota West.
Yeah, that's where we really got it going, and we had both the offense and the defense firing on all cylinders. It's just what happened, and you really saw it continue throughout the season, and especially in the Princeton game even. That's where it kept elevating and got better and better.
Yeah, you talk about Princeton. They go to Princeton, to the home of the Vikings. It was a little bit close there at the beginning, but then Lakota West able to pull away, no problem. They end up putting almost a running clock on Princeton coming out into the second half of play.
Yeah, they put that running clock up on Princeton almost, but the only thing that restricted them from that was that punt that was where it was down. But
It was down. It was 100% down. We all saw the picture. We put a big picture up on our stream that it was down. We can agree.
And so, Princeton's where we put it all together, and we almost shut them out. Looking at the playoffs, we might have a rematch in that second round of the playoffs, and so we're very excited for that one, and I think Lakota West will be ready.
Hey, you do mention the playoffs. Princeton is a very big threat. We could be seeing them in the second round. Obviously, Lakota West going to be taking on Lebanon back at home, Firebird Field, week 11 to get these playoffs started. And you look at another playoff team, and another team that kind of gave Lakota West a little bit of a fit in their game, the Fairfield Indians, who we go into their home on their homecoming night, and they made it a little bit scary, taking the Firebirds all the way to a second overtime.
Yeah, that Fairfield game was really one of the most electric games of the year here. And one of those reasons Fairfield was so close and was able to compete that big with West is it was their homecoming game. They were hyped up all week. They were doing pep rallies, and so it got there big time. But Talon Fisher, he knows how to play football, and he's one of the best quarterbacks in the GMC. And you really got to see it there that night when he just used his legs and his arms to run all over Lakota West.
We've seen Lakota West, a second-half football team, all year long. It really showed in that Fairfield game. They go in the half down a few points to Fairfield. They come back out. Not only do they tie it up, they take a lead for the short time, and then it gets to second overtime. And a couple players, we already mentioned their name briefly. Jacob Asbeck able to punch out that football in second overtime, give Lakota West a win after a scoop and what should be score from Elijah Davis.
Yeah, it was an electric play. It was probably the most memorable one of the year. And so you just love to see that, and it was a great thing there, and it was honestly just a great game overall.
Yeah, absolutely great football being played, and Lakota West, nearly perfect. I mean, the record shows that they were perfect. There's not a whole lot that you can improve on with that record. I mean, I'm sure this team likes to think they can keep getting better and better, but what do you think we're going to see really them focus on and come out with week 11 and coming to Firebird Field for round 1 of the playoffs?
I think what we're looking at there is Lakota West just wants to keep the momentum going. You don't want to try something too outlandish and get off on the wrong foot. You don't want to have just, bad momentum going into this really rough playoff schedule. And so I see West just sticking to what they know, sticking to those multiple option plays where they focus on multiple players, and sticking to multiple big personnel packages to really hold themselves in and just stick to their guns. So I expect to see a textbook game from Lakota West and just trying to, wipe up the floor and get it done with.
Well, a lot going on here for Lakota West football. We got a lot to talk about. Lots coming up later in the night. We even got a new segment that we will be bringing on, the awards for this year. We have 6 awards that we will be giving out: Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Special Teams Player of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year, Breakout Player of the Year, and the one that everyone's been waiting for, the Most Valuable Player Award that we will be giving out.
Yep. And so we'll get to that later tonight.
Yeah, and we still got a couple of other things to talk about, too. We talked briefly about the playoffs. We're going to go more in depth on that in a few moments. We also have that interview with Mike Brankamp, one of the big linebackers that have been showcasing their talent all year for Lakota West. We got all of that and more here from Buffalo Wings and Rings on 747. So come down and join us if you're at home. You got nothing to do. Come out, join the party here. If not, we thank you for tuning in from home. We'll be right back in a moment, but don't go anywhere. We got a lot to discuss.
Ruoff Mortgage. Ruoff Mortgage is proud to serve the Westchester area for all your mortgage needs. Located at 8748 Union Center Boulevard, right in the heart of Westchester. With every closing, they are opening doors. Ruoff Mortgage Company, Inc., NMLS, number 141868.
And we are back from Buffalo Wings and Rings on 747. Lots more to talk about, so thank you for sticking with us. As always, come on out and join us here at Buffalo Wings and Rings on 747, the first edition of Bird Talk Live. We're happy that all of you could tune in and make it. We got a lot to talk about, and a lot of that being Lakota West going up against Lebanon this Friday night, round 1 of the OHSAA playoffs, and it should be one incredible matchup if you're a Lakota West fan.
Well, I mean, Lakota West is 10-0. There's not much to say about that. The 3rd seed against the, 14th seed? I'm not sure how much of a chance they have there, but Princeton, of course, going up against West Claremont, and I feel like the second round and third round is what Lakota West is looking forward, because, I mean, you don't want to go out and say that they're going to beat Lebanon because you don't want to jinx it, right? But in the case that we do beat Lebanon, we would most likely play Princeton in the second round, and that'll be an interesting rematch from earlier this season.
Most likely, but we still do have week 1 of the playoffs to go, no matter who the favorite is in that ball game, and it's going to take quite a bit of talent coming through for Lakota West. Obviously, they're 10-0. They have the talent. It's just a matter of what shows through in that game. So, Grant, I'll ask you, who do you think is going to be the key player in winning that game against Lebanon?
I think in that Lebanon game, it's really just going to come down to if we can just execute. I don't think it's really going to come down to one player, because how this team has worked this whole season is, as you saw in that St. X game, it doesn't work when you're trying to get it to one player or trying to do that. Where this offense really found their rhythm when they learned to spread the ball out. I mean, they have the number 1 wide receiver in the GMC and the number 3. Like, it's about their ability to distribute the ball and just execute. And so it won't come down to one player. It'll come down if the team works as a family.
Yeah, of course. And, this week, of course, we got to give you a little shout-out. You did a video, a little breakdown on the Lakota West offense and how versatile it can be. So you think we're going to see a little bit more of that against Lebanon, or you think they're going to keep it a little basic, kind of hide that playbook?
So I think we will, because it's become what's made us so good. I mean, you can go watch the video. It's up now. But the main point of that video was how Coach Tom Bolden really just disguises his formations and his personnel through great use of his players. And so, of course, you're going to see Trent Lloyd being used in that way, in that running back and wide receiver role to create decoys across the line. But you're also just going to see the defense we've come to know. And I just think it'll stay close to that textbook play. Like, West has a way they play, and no one's found a way to stop it yet. So why change it? They already know how we play. Let's just keep it going.
Yeah, and that defense, we didn't do a breakdown on them, but we do still have a lot to talk about. They've been dominant all year. Really, ever since Coach Bolden has taken over this Lakota West team, they've been dominant, lights out, in pretty much every game they play. Obviously, this year, maybe with the exception of the Fairfield game, that was a very off game. You can't really count that. I mean, they've been lights out all year, haven't really allowed many points. And, of course, against the Lebanon offense that's had times of struggle throughout the year, you got to wonder what they're going to be able to do.
Yeah, West is ranked 5th in the state based off of the OSA computer rankings, and Lebanon's 54th out of 64. So, that's a pretty inherent there, but you don't want to underestimate any team. You're going to take it week by week. We all know that at this point. And so expect them coming out to just capitalize on Lebanon's placing and just capitalize on the weaknesses they've spotted.
So we've talked a bit about Lakota West. We did talk about Princeton. They got a big matchup. Lakota West most likely going to be playing the Vikings. Of course, if the higher seeds win that. We do have a couple of other games in our section of the bracket to pay attention to, one of those being Elder. Not necessarily just this week. Elder could be one of those teams that we face week 3 of the playoffs if both teams end up making it, of course, if those higher seeds end up winning as expected. So what are we looking at if we potentially see Elder a little bit later down the line?
Elder, they're one of the more difficult teams. They're from that GCL South, and all 4 of those teams in the GCL are just, you don't take any of those teams lightly. And so that's what you're seeing here. It's a tough team. They play them probably arguably the toughest division in Ohio. GMC, of course, is also the tougher, but when you're in a 4-team division where all 4 teams are super teams, it is what it is. And so we're going to go up against Elder, and I believe, allegedly up against Elder. And when we face them, I believe we'll give it all we have. And there's not much to say but execute.
It depends on where you look, but it seems like at times this Elder team and rankings and such have been put above these Firebirds a lot. And I know Lakota West, they're not taking that lightly. We know how this staff and how these players work. They don't like that. So they're definitely going to use that game as an opportunity. Of course, Elder being the number 2 seed in our region, Lakota West the number 3. But of course, you take away those two, there is still a number 1. Lakota West is very familiar with them, and that is the Moeller Crusaders.
Yeah, last year Moeller was the one that ended Lakota West's season in that regional final game. It was such a sad game. We lost it just in those final seconds, but, you know, odds of fate say we'll meet them in the finals again. We're both on the separate side of the bracket, so if it happens, it'll be the finals. And I've been talking with these West players all week and all year, and all they've been saying to me is, we're ready for that game. They're not saying, ooh, we're going to crush them. They're just saying, we've been doing our homework, and when it comes to the game, we believe we'll be ready. And so, give it to them.
So from watching the game last year, knowing what we now know, and watching both of these teams separately this year, what do you think are going to be the differences in game plan that we see Coach Bolden and this coaching staff go with once they get, if they get to week 4 against Moeller?
So Moeller has multiple all-conference linebackers and D linemen, and they also have an all-conference corner. So it's a little bit difficult to game plan because they have players in all ranks of the defense just executing high level. But Lakota West last year, their game plan was pushing that ball downfield and getting vertical against Moeller, and it ultimately left them open to weakness multiple times in the game. And so I think this time, if they come up against Moeller, they're going to be trying to stick with the ball a little bit lower, a little bit less high risk. High risk, high reward. Sadly, they didn't get the reward last time, so I think they're going to stay a little bit more with a safer game and just trying to execute on what they know they can do.
So there are still 2 other games in round 1 this week that Lakota West going to be keeping an eye on, and one of those is the Springboro and Oak Hills game. Of course, if Moeller keeps winning, they will face either Springboro or Oak Hills, the winner of that game, or the winner of the Mason-Coleraine game. Of course, we keep saying if the higher seeds win, if Springboro ends up taking on Mason, who do you think you'd rather face if you're Moeller?
I think they would rather face, you're saying out of the 4 teams, Springboro, Oak Hills, Mason, and Coleraine?
Assuming it's probably Springboro Mason.
I would rather take on Mason. Mason's shown strong ability in a couple of games, but they've also shown strong weakness in a couple of games. And so once you find that weakness, Mason's had trouble keeping up at all points in that game. And so I would say I would rather Mason.
Right, and Lakota West, they took on Mason earlier this year at home, and Mason was able to hang around for that one. It was a very close game at half, only a field goal separating the two. And then magically, they come out at halftime. We've talked about it all year. Lakota West, that second half team, and they put a running clock on the Comets in half number 2.
Yeah, they did put that running clock on the Comets, and why? Because 27 unanswered. It went from 10-7 to 37-7 very quickly, and that just happens when you've got an offense that doesn't stop. Like I said, you've got so many weapons on that offense: Giovanni Wilson, Udez Gonzalez, Trent Lloyd. I mean, all of them. It's just incredible. And then Mitch Bolden, who's accounted for 35 touchdowns in 10 games, is insane. There's no other word about it. And so as soon as that offense clicks, there's no stopping it. And so that's what happened there.
So we're talking about a little bit later down the line. Let's talk about more next week. There's a very intriguing matchup in round 1, and that is Fairfield taking on St. X, one of the better games, if not the best game, really in Ohio for round 1 of these tournament games. So if you're Moeller, once again, who's that team you're kind of looking out for, not really sure who you want to take on in that game?
If I'm Moeller, I personally want Fairfield. Because St. X, sure, they have a losing record. You look at them and they go, hey, they're 4-6. Why would we want to take them? But here's the thing. They've played great team after great team. They lost to West by 3. They lost to Moeller by 3. They hang in with all these big teams. And when you only lose by 3 points to the best teams in the state over and over, one of those times those 3 points are going to go the wrong way, and St. X is going to win. Fairfield has had their falls. They've had great games. They've had some okay games, some bad games. Ultimately, they had a good season, but St. X has stuck in practically every game. They were blown out once early in the season, but every game they've stuck in. And when you've got a team that can keep pace with any team, eventually you're going to get outpaced. And so I'd be looking to face Fairfield in that first round.
So, of course, you bring up a good point. If St. X does win that ball game, you talk about that 3-point difference in that first match. You got to wonder, momentum, a big part of football. If you're a Moeller, does that give you an advantage looking to go in there and put down St. X worse, or if you're St. X, you think that gives you more of an advantage, hoping to go up against a Moeller team with a bit more juice?
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
Yeah, so do you think the 3-point differential, if Moeller and St. X were to play each other again, who do you think that would help out the most as far as momentum goes?
I think momentum would, if Moeller and St. X plays again, I think ultimately St. X, if they won that game, they would gain even more momentum because they've been beat down all year over and over again. They just keep losing by small points. And so if they win finally that small point contest, they're going to feel good about themselves, and I think they'll start rolling. But Moeller doesn't really need momentum, let's be honest. They've had momentum all year long. They're just looking to get the job done, but St. X could get a huge boost from that game.
So I got to ask now, if Lakota West were to go up against Moeller, we are talking 4 weeks out, little preemptive, but we got to get those out of the way. If Moeller were to go up against Lakota West, how close do you think it would be, and do you think Lakota West would come out on top?
You never want to say the answer to that question, because all of a sudden you say the answer to that question and you've just jinxed your team. You've gone the wrong way. But I think it'll be a great matchup that'll definitely come down in the one-score column. But I don't think you're going to be finding it as a game where either team blows out. But I think West has been seeing this all year. They lost to Moeller last year. This is what they want. This is the perfect storybook ending, is if they can beat Moeller this time in the regional final. And so they want it, and they're going to be ready.
All right, well, we still got a lot more to talk about here on the show. We got that awards segment coming up in just a few moments. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back. As always, thanks for tuning in to Bird Talk Live from Buffalo Wings and Rings here on 747. We'll be right back.
Ruoff Mortgage. Ruoff Mortgage is proud to serve the Westchester area for all your mortgage needs. Located at 8748 Union Center Boulevard, right in the heart of Westchester. With every closing, they are opening doors. Ruoff Mortgage Company, Inc., NMLS, number 141868. Ruoff Mortgage. Ruoff Mortgage is proud to serve the Westchester area for all your mortgage needs. Located at 8748 Union Center Boulevard, right in the heart of Westchester. With every closing, they are opening doors. Ruoff Mortgage Company, Inc., NMLS, number 141868. Ruoff Mortgage. Ruoff Mortgage is proud to serve the Westchester area for all your mortgage needs. Located at 8748 Union Center Boulevard, right in the heart of Westchester. With every closing, they are opening doors. Ruoff Mortgage Company, Inc., NMLS, number 141868. Ruoff Mortgage. Ruoff Mortgage is proud to serve the Westchester area for all your mortgage needs. Located at 8748 Union Center Boulevard, right in the heart of Westchester. With every closing, they are opening doors. Ruoff Mortgage Company, Inc., NMLS, number 141868.
And we are back from Buffalo Wings and Rings, Bird Talk Live. We still got a little bit more to talk about, one of the more anticipated segments, or at least on our part, one of the segments we've been really looking forward to is the award segment. We've come up with 6 different awards that we are going to be giving out to different Lakota West Firebirds. But really, it's this whole team. It's really not the individual. It's this whole team that's come together. But these individuals kind of spark that fire that gets this club going.
Yeah, without these people on the team, there would be no 10-0 season like we had this season. I mean, every single player that we have decided to vote for these awards has been a key contributor to this season, and without them, we probably wouldn't be here right now.
So we do have 6 awards, like we said, and the first one that we are going to be starting off with is that Offensive Player of the Year award. We have 4 nominees. We're going to talk a little bit about each one, and then we'll give you the final verdict, who wins that ever coveted award that nobody knew about until about half hour ago, but not the point. So Offensive Player of the Year. The first guy on that ballot is, of course, Mitch Bolden, a quarterback of the Lakota West Firebirds. He's been with them for years now, and this year especially really took off.
Yeah, I mean, you take a look at Mitch Bolden. What did he have, like over 2,000 passing yards this year?
About 2,033.
Yeah, you're the stats guy. That's why I wanted to confirm it with you. But yeah, without Mitch Bolden, I mean, this Lakota West team is designed around him. Their game plan is built around him and what he can do with the ball when he runs with his feet, when he throws the ball. Everything's just built around him, and he's been a huge part of this Lakota West offense and the reason we are 10-0.
Of course, and after Mitch Bolden on that list, we do have Trent Lloyd, who's been an incredible playmaker for this Firebirds team all year long. He did miss 2 games in there with injuries, and even in those 8 games that he did play, still made an incredible difference, and he put himself on this list.
Yeah, and he's like, 3rd in receiving yards in the GMC or 4th, something like that. Have to confirm with you again.
Yeah, he's about 3rd in the GMC in yards with 530, and he's about 20th in rushing with about 250 yards. So he's really just a dual threat that you just see all over.
Impressive off the top knowledge.
Well, you see, that's why I have to confirm with Mr. Hageman over here. He knows everything about what he's talking about, and that's why he's our analyst, right? But yeah, you take a look at a guy like Trent Lloyd. I mean, he's huge. He's just an electric player. I feel like when the ball's in his hands, you know something good is going to happen. And ever so rarely, something good doesn't happen. But most of the time something good does happen. That's what we get excited about whenever he has the ball in his hands.
And of course, we did see that difference when he didn't play Fairfield. We can't confirm it was all him, but you did see that final score without Trent Lloyd in that lineup, which then brings us to our next guy, and that would be Brennan Remy, a breakout wide receiver this year, who, we saw him a little bit last year, but this year especially, he has been on fire and one of the top playmakers, not just on this Firebirds team, but really around the area.
Yeah, Brennan Remy, just the breakthrough season for him. He's been huge this year. I mean, I don't know if anybody really expected him to go above and beyond like he did this year. A lot of the breakouts usually happen that junior, senior year, but I mean, he started off with a bang, and he just did not let go of the gas, just kept going and helped out this team in every single step of the way to this record.
And that brings us to our fourth and final nominee, Offensive Player of the Year, Giovanni Wilson, who's been one of those guys really that stepped up this year. He's been kind of splitting time with Junior Gonzalez, but Giovanni Wilson, especially towards the end of the season, really turned on the Jets there.
Yeah, with Giovanni Wilson, I mean, when he wasn't in the game, you knew it was already the game was over. Davion McCoy was in, we won it. But Giovanni Wilson does everything he needs to do, whether it's pass blocking or even run blocking for Mitch Bolden. He's there for us, and every single step of the way this season. He's been the go-to guy in any department on the offense.
Yeah, he's essentially competing with four running backs there. You got Giovanni Wilson, you got Junior Gonzalez, you got Davion McCoy, and Mitch Bolden. We've seen Mitch Bolden able to do it through the air, able to do it on the ground. So a very impressive run game that we've seen from Lakota West all year.
100%. Hags, I'm going to take this one over to you. You can analyze how that goes and how the run game works with Lakota West.
So the run game is really just diverse overall. And one of the big things about it is, like you said, how many weapons there are. So Mitch Bolden obviously leads the team in yards. And then you've got second in yards, Trent Lloyd, and then Giovanni and Udez. And so really with just all those weapons, you can just move them around. And Giovanni has really stepped up multiple times. Anytime Trent Lloyd has to go out for injury or any other purpose, Giovanni takes that Trent Lloyd role and just runs with it. He even ran with his number at one point in this year. And so you just love to see it.
So, Grant, I'll give you the honors here. You made the graphics for these, so I'll let you reveal who our Offensive Player of the Year is. You want a little drum roll? See if I can drum one up.
Your Offensive Player of the Year, yes, of course. Who would it be besides Mitch Bolden? So, yep, that's who you've got this year. It was a great pick. 35 touchdowns is an absolutely ridiculous number of touchdowns in 10 games. That's 3.5 scores a game. I mean, he really knew how to do it. 25 through the air, 10 through the ground. And really I believe he had no fumbles this season, and he only had 5 interceptions. And so he was really just an all-around guy who knew what he was doing, and he was really what got this offense going.
Yeah, so of course you mentioned we love Mitch Bolden, everything he's done for this program. The senior quarterback, he will sadly be leaving the program after this year. But this year especially, to see him on the ground pick up multiple touchdowns in a game, it wasn't an uncommon occurrence.
Yeah, he was able to pick up multiple touchdowns per game. That's the reason he had 35 in the year. He's just an all-around touchdown machine, as Coach Bolden says. He said in one of the interviews, I believe it was after the Fairfield game, he said, "This is not dad talk when I say this is coach talk. The kid just knows how to win." And so that's what the kid does. He wins.
Absolutely, and that's exactly who you want leading your Lakota West team. And now that brings us to our second award, which would be the Defensive Player of the Year. And the first one on the ballot for that, currently committed to the University of Northwestern, and that would be Josh Fussell.
Yeah, Josh has been an absolute huge part of this Lakota West defense, a quiet part, but a huge part. We haven't said his name much. I believe we made that clear against Coleraine. We made that clear that when his name is said, it is a huge play, because if he's not targeted, his name's not going to be said. A few times he has been targeted. It's been interceptions. It's been pass deflections. It's been fumble recovery, stuff like that for Josh Fussell. So, I mean, like we said, as a defensive back, you want to be a quiet name, and that's what Josh Fussell is.
Absolutely, and he's a D1 commit for a reason. We've seen that talent, like you said. Quarterbacks really don't throw his way, but especially in a secondary that's made up of pretty much all D1 commits. I mean, his name really sticks out one of the most.
100%. I mean, like I said, that everybody sees our whole defensive secondary, such as who we got back there. Josh Fussell, we got Ben Minnick, Malik Hartford.
Drew
Minnick, the brother of Ben Minnick. I knew I was missing one.
Tabron Benny Powell.
Tabron's oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yes.
See, that shows you how much I know about Lakota West football. But anyway, here I am up on the stand here in front of the camera. This is why I stay behind the scenes. I mean, but yeah, I mean, it's just, like I said, Josh Fussell, he's been huge, and he's just one of those guys that without him, we wouldn't have the season we did.
And of course, this next guy, you don't have to know a ton about Lakota West football to know his name. Number 11, Jacob Asbeck, a real difference maker, especially towards the later end of the season. We saw him in that Fairfield game. He won that game, punching out that football, of course, scooped up by Elijah Davis. But you look beyond that game, it seems like every single game he has at least 3 big difference-making plays.
Exactly, and I'm going to go back to you on this one. Leads the GMC in sacks, correct?
He's second, I think.
He's second?
Wait, no, he does lead the GMC in sacks with 8 sacks, and he is second in tackles for loss with 13, where he's behind one man, who I believe is on Princeton.
So number 11, Jacob Asbeck, has been a huge player as he does lead the GMC in sacks. Like without him, I mean, who's going to get to the quarterback? He's at the top, and again, like I keep saying, with every single one of these players, there's a reason they're on this team, and it's a good reason, of course.
Of course, you mentioned his name too a little bit earlier on, currently committed to Notre Dame. It seems like every week we get a ton of love from South Bend. All these guys excited to see this guy next year, number 13, Ben Minnick. He's been showing off every single week. Every week, he's another one of those guys that has at least 2 or 3 big plays that really shift the course of the game.
I mean, Ben Minnick is just a huge player, an electric player on our defense. He's the Trent Lloyd of our defense, I'd say. I'm going to use that comparison. Absolutely electric player. And when he has the ball in his hands, it's a huge play. Like I said, every single time that Ben Minnick gets the ball on that defensive side, he's going to return it as far as he can, maybe even get a touchdown. He's going to force fumbles. He's going to recover fumbles. What else does a defensive player do? Anything that Ben Minnick does, anything that a defensive player does, Ben Minnick does just as well.
Right, and I like the comparison to Trent Lloyd there. I mean, we do see Ben Minnick all 3 phases of the game. Defense, he's locking down these wide receivers. On offense, he's caught multiple touchdown passes this year. We even see him on special teams a little bit. He's the team's punter. We haven't even seen him a little bit at punt returner. So really one of those athletes that can do it all. I'm excited to see what Notre Dame decides to do with him.
Is he ever on the sideline? I don't think he's ever on the sideline. I think he's on the field all how much do they play, 48 minutes?
Well, I think you like to see him on the sideline because ideally that means Lakota West has a running clock up. So
fair enough. You give the younger guys a chance.
Right, you'll have to see it. And then another guy, the final guy that we have on the Defensive Player of the Year ballot, that would be number 5, Mike Brankamp. We've said his name multiple times throughout this broadcast. Number 5, a difference maker in what is called linebacker high, recently dubbed for Lakota West. So we've seen him all throughout this year, very powerful force. What do we like about him?
Really, one of his biggest things is his football IQ. You're going to ask anyone on that defense, any coach, nobody knows the defense better than Michael Brankamp. Before every play, he's calling audibles like a QB from the back. He's calling everything out, and then magically he finds his way to get to the tackle every time. He has over 70 tackles, making him 4th in the GMC in tackles and leading our team. Next closest player has 20 less on our team. I mean, he just knows where to find the ball, and he's just like a magnet for any offensive player, and he's a special player.
So I'll go ahead and throw it right back to you. Who is the Lakota West Defensive Player of the Year?
The LWHSSBC Defensive Player of the Year is Jacob Asbeck this year. After getting 8 sacks and 13 tackles for loss, along with 50 tackles in 10 games, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And so that's what you're seeing there from Asbeck.
So we talked about offense, we talked about defense. Now time for one of the more overlooked parts of this Lakota West team. I mean, they make up a big part of why this team is 10-0. We've seen them all year long be very consistent, and it's time to give them a little bit of an award. And the first guy up for that award, we talked about him. He was in the last category, Ben Minnick.
I mean, Ben Minnick, like you said, on every single side of the ball, whether it be offense, defense, special teams, punting the ball, returning the punts. I mean, he's on every single side of the ball. And, of course, a player as versatile as that is somebody that is going to be on special teams, and he's performed at the top level all season. And he deserves to be on that candidates list.
And of course, one of those guys, we see him on defense too, and especially on special teams. I mean, he's a very hard hitter. He's currently committed to Ohio State, number 1, Malik Hartford.
Yeah, Malik, I mean, everybody's scared on the punt. So when they're backed up all the way inside their 10 on the punt, you know Malik and the rest of the team are going to come crashing through. And I believe he's gotten to a few this season. So, I mean, he's ready to block any punt, get through that line as fast as he can, and teams are afraid of that.
Yeah, he works on both sides of the punt. He's one of the best gunners of the team, and he also snaps the ball, I believe, for all kicks. And so he snaps the ball, he goes down on punts after the player and after to block the punt. I mean, he's all around a special teams machine.
Right, and that takes us to the third candidate. We've been seeing him all year long. Kicked a couple of very long field goals this season to really help out these Lakota West Firebirds. Tyler Bond, the left-legged place kicker for Lakota West.
Yeah, we spoke about him earlier on. Tyler Bond is just, like you said, an absolute machine. Dude drills 55-yard field goals before the game like it's nothing. And if he, like I said, if he got a chance to do it in a game, no problem. He's got it. I mean, that's never going to happen because we'll usually get the ball further down the field if we need to kick. But if he did somehow get a chance to kick it, he's got it, and he deserves to be on that list 100%.
Yeah, we've seen him kick a couple long ones this year, and you got to think, I mean, we've talked to him a little bit about this, that coaching staff getting a little bit more confident with him, kind of in those sticky situations around maybe like the 35 to 40-yard line, considering maybe letting Tyler take a shot at it.
I mean, you always got, I mean, even as Lakota West, you can take a shot on anything at this point. You've got the ability to do anything, and you can trust your team. Take a shot. Why not?
All right, and the fourth guy, the Special Teams Player of the Year, Aaron Peters.
One of just a solid player. He's a senior. He's been here a long time. And now he comes in, and, I mean, this is one of the most overlooked things. Those holders on kicks, the reason kickers get fired in the NFL every day is because the holds back with the laces are facing, so many different things. But he's out there every time holding it, and there's never once been a problem with the hold, I believe. Occasionally, you know, it gets blocked, or there might be a little bit of a rough snap once or twice. That happened this season, but he's been a steady rock this whole time, and it was great to see him working.
All right, so who is the final verdict, the Special Teams Player of the Year?
Special Teams Player of the Year is going to be Tyler Bond. Who else would it be? Hitting along a 46 and putting in 31 of his 32 extra points. It's just incredible, and that was a block on the one. And then I believe he put in 6 of 7 field goals, and the only one that was a miss was that Middletown kick that didn't go in. And
100% went in. 100% went in. You can check it out on our YouTube channel. We have video proof. Unfortunately, no way to review it.
Yeah, so he obviously deserved it. He's first in kickers and points by far, and then he's third in all players and points. That means just any point scored by anybody, he's a kicker. He puts up 1 point at a time. He's just that consistent that he is third in points in all of the GMC.
So, of course, you have a team like Lakota West, obviously very talented, all these D1 commits, but behind the D1 commits, you have a lot of guys who are also very talented that maybe just don't have the spotlight thrown on them because of those D1 commits, and a lot of these guys will go on to become D1 commits of their own. So we have the Breakout Player of the Year award that we want to highlight a couple of these guys who this year they were given opportunities and they just ran with them. And the first one, we've said his name already. He was in the Offensive Player of the Year category. That would be number 14, Brendan Remy, who has just had flashes of greatness all year long.
Yeah, you spoke about him in the Offensive Player of the Year. Brendan Remy is just, he's come out, put his foot on the gas, has not stopped, kept rolling for Lakota West with huge plays. Just Mitch Bolden, it's like a Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase connection. When Mitch Bolden is in trouble, it's just like, Brendan's down there somewhere, and just chucks it up, and somehow Brendan Remy will be there. He'll come down with a catch and make a huge play for West.
And of course, that receiver duo, Trent Lloyd and Brendan Remy, they've been incredible all year long. But then you kind of flip sides of the ball. Our next guy, he's been a breakout guy, number 90, Elijah Davis on that defensive line.
Yeah, Elijah's has broken through all year multiple times. He was our second in sacks on the team, I believe, and it's just incredible what he did. And so Elijah, although he wasn't quite as big last year, that's why he's in the breakout category. He came through and was a big part. I believe he was probably the biggest part of our D-line this year, and it was a great thing to see him break out.
Of course, another one of those guys, number 3 on the list, be Drew Minnick, who typically when you hear the name Minnick, because of years like last year, you think the Notre Dame commit, you think Ben. But of course, this guy, he's been quietly consistent all year too. He's been pretty shut down on that defensive side of the ball. He's been very great in coverage all year long.
I mean, Drew Minnick has played on the offensive side a little bit on this season, and on the defensive side. I believe he's proven himself on both sides of the ball. And of course, like you said, mostly on the defensive side with a few huge interceptions, if I can speak here. Few huge interceptions for the Lakota West Firebirds, and just sealed out a few big games.
All right, that brings us to the final guy in this category. Last year, he wasn't a friend of ours. He was on Lakota East. That would be Tabron Benny Powell, who's been one of those guys that Lakota West can count on this defense to get those turnovers, get those quarterback pressures, and turn games around.
You know what? If Tabron Benny Powell was allowed to play for us last year, he would have had that Breakout Player of the Year award if we were a thing last year as well. But unfortunately, he could not play for us due to those rules that we don't necessarily agree with. However, he did come out this season, was a huge player, was a huge part of this Lakota West defense, and absolutely deserves to be a candidate on this list.
All right, so Grant, who is that breakout player?
I think it's pretty obviously Brennan Remy. He went from really just a depth wide receiver last year to #1 in the GMC. There's not a bigger breakout than you can ask for in that. And so that's what you had. That's what happened. And there you go. Brendan Remy, your breakout player of the year this year. Really just, he thrives off of body control and positioning. His ability to hold on to the ball while also maintaining just full, like just control over everything he does is quite incredible. Only player you can really compare it to, I feel like, is Terry McLaurin. He just quite honestly gets there as no other player does.
So, of course, we have our breakout players of the year, guys who, maybe didn't get the opportunities last year. And then we have this next category, the comeback player of the year, guys who, due to unfortunate circumstances, weren't able to be around last year. They would have been as great last year as they were this year, but this year especially had that spotlight on them and they just performed.
Yeah, this is usually saved for people who sadly got injured but came back even stronger. And there's really only one player that comes to mind this year, so you've got to give it to him. That's Michael Brankamp. Last year he struggled with injuries all year in that left knee. He's had arm injuries. He's had everything over the past few years, but he's here. He's finally here. He played a full season. What did he do? He led his team in tackles and was top 5, #4 in the GMC in tackles. It's just incredible the turnaround he made, and we're glad to have him as a part of the team.
Yeah, and we did mention he was supposed to come on for an interview during the show. We do want to apologize due to unfortunate circumstances beyond our control. We were not able to get Mike on this show, but we will try and catch up with him another time. But that brings us to the final and most anticipated award, which would be the Most Valuable Player Award. We had a couple guys in the running for this one. And once again, in his 3rd award category this year, Ben Minnick.
Well, I mean, there's not much to say. As we've said at the past 2 awards, too. I mean, Ben Minnick is a huge player on the Lakota West team and deserves to be in any part of this list, too.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Shohei Ohtani trait. He might, it doesn't matter if he doesn't win the Offensive Player of the Year or the Defensive Player of the Year. If you're the 2nd best or the 3rd best at multiple positions, you're the best on the field. And that's really what makes Ben so good at his game. It's just complete versatility. He's proficient at every position that we know he's played, at least. And so that's why he's in this award for running. He's the starting safety, one of the wide receivers, and the starting punter. So you can't ask for anything more.
So this next guy, he can run the ball, he can catch the ball, he can do it all for this Lakota West football team, and that is once again #4, Trent Lloyd.
Yeah, I mean, Trent Lloyd, he's how this offense found its identity and how Lakota West found their identity. Really what's powered this Lakota West offense is their ability to just utilize players in ways that other teams have never even thought of before. Like, I talked about this in the video we've talked about a couple times. I mean, he's one of the biggest players in a play where he never even touched the ball. I mean, it's just how it works. His ability and his threat makes 7, 8 defenders go the whole wrong way of the field. And when you're that big of a threat, you know you're going to be that big of an award nominee. So that's why Trent Lloyd has that nomination.
And hey, if you want to find out a little bit more about Trent Lloyd and this Lakota West offense, once again, go check out the video produced by our own Grant Hageman just the other day about this Lakota West offense and how powerful of a force they can be. And that brings us to our 2 final candidates for this. Of course, our Defensive Player of the Year, Jacob Asbeck. We already talked about him a little bit.
Yeah, there's nothing really needed to be said. I mean, 3rd on the team in tackles, 1st in the GMC in sacks, and then up there in tackles for loss. I mean, it was just ridiculous numbers he was putting up all season long. you can't say anything, but he's just an incredible guy.
And then that brings us to our Offensive Player of the Year and fourth candidate up for Most Valuable Player, the quarterback, number 7, Mitch Bolton.
35 touchdowns, that's all I've got to say. 35 touchdowns, 10 games. That's enough to win you an NFL MVP. He's just, it's an incredible force to be reckoned with, and no team has really been able to match it except Fairfield. But sadly, what they do, they fumbled it, and fumbles were Mitch Bolton's problem last year, but they're not here this year. And so he's as close to you'll get as a perfect high school quarterback. And so there it is. I mean, Mitch Bolton, he's just a great, incredible guy. And so that's why he goes on to win the MVP for the LWHSSBC awards this year. Sadly, once again, nobody was able to join us tonight due to just some scheduling things, but we'll hopefully have them on in the next weeks, and we'll catch up with them later. But he won this award for great reason, and those are your LWHSSBC awards for this year.
So there you have it, the MVP of the year, these Lakota West Firebirds. They've been talented all year long. They're 10-0. They have Lebanon this week at home on Friday. Not only looking to go 11-0, but win a game in the first round of the OHSAA playoffs. It should be a fun one. As always, you can watch live on our channel. We'll be bringing you the coverage of that one. And we thank you for tuning in to the first ever Bird Talk live from down here at Buffalo Wings and Drinks on 747. We thank them for letting us host this show. And we thank all of you for tuning in along with us. So as always, go Firebirds.